Good evening, everybody. My name is Ashley Lucas, and I recently published a book which is called Prison Theater and the Global Crisis of Incarceration. And I'm honored today to be here with a panel of wonderful theater makers who all work in prisons in different parts of the world. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves to you so that we can find out about the amazing theater work that I got to see in my research travels. We're going to start off with Franny Shepard Bates. Hi, Franny.
Hi. I'm Franny Shepard Bates, and I'm the director of Shakespeare in Prison, which is a program of Detroit Public Theater in Michigan. We've been working with women in Michigan's only women's prison since 2012. And we've also worked with men and with youth. And generally what we do is we have a 9-month process through which collaboratively we it's a lot. We have a 9-month process, which is fully collaborative, where we're working on one play by Shakespeare, and we need to read it and discuss it and eventually put it all together, cast it collaboratively, and perform it at the end of 9 months, having cut it down to about 90 minutes. And so it becomes about ownership of the material and the process, personal empowerment, and the positive development of people's narrative identities. So the way they define themselves based on how they tell their own life stories. And that collaboration extends even beyond that in-prison program, where again, we're collaborating artistically and also on the program's operation. We're also now working with alumni of our program after they've gone home. Artistically, still, we're writing a book together, and also on, they advise us on the program overall and work with us on a variety of projects. And we offer a lot of personal support to them as well. Whatever we can do within our capacity to support people, that's what we want to be doing. I think that's it in a nutshell.
I thought that was a great nutshell. And one of the things that I really love about your work with Shakespeare in Prison is that y'all have such an incredible blog. I don't know any other prison theater company in the world that sort of broadcasts to the public in writing on a regular basis about exactly what's happening in the prison.
Yeah, generally we'll write a blog. We'll do an entry every session that we meet for 2.5 hours, which is generally twice a week. So one of our facilitators will write that blog and then we'll post it at the end of the week. And we also try to keep, because right now we're not able to blog because we're not there, we try to keep it going through social media. So generally daily posts that'll have a photo of the group at work and a quote from somebody, not necessarily that same person, usually not that same person, to kind of just, again, keep the work visible, like you said, Ashley, and make sure that we're drawing attention to this good work that happens where people generally don't see it.
Yeah, even the Michigan Department of Corrections likes your Twitter account. It's amazing.
It's true.
Thank you, Franny. I want to turn now to the other side of the United States, to Johnny Stallings, who works with a company called Open Hearts, Open Minds. Johnny, how are things in Oregon?
The rains came recently, and so the air is a lot clearer, and hopefully that will help the firefighters put out the huge fires that we've had. I started going to prison in 2006, doing a dialogue group, talking about the meaning of life with a circle of men. It didn't have anything to do with theater, really. But after 2 years, one of the men who was serving a life sentence asked me if I'd be interested in doing a play with them. And so that in 2008, we did a production of Hamlet. And as far as I know, it was the first time that inmates in an Oregon prison had performed a play by Shakespeare. And 2 years later, we did Midsummer Night's Dream. We did mostly Shakespeare plays. Also, we did 12 Angry Men. And in 2015, I kind of transitioned some younger directors into directing the plays at Two Rivers Prison in Umatilla. The organization I started, Open Hearts, Open Minds, grew it has 20 some active volunteers and programs in five different programs in 3 different Oregon prisons, including the women's prison, Coffee Creek. So that's it in my nutshell.
Thank you, Johnny. I think one of the most amazing things that I saw happening at Open Hearts, Open Minds is the fact that you have such an incredible reception where the audience and the cast get to intermingle and eat donuts and share their families with one another after the performances. Could you say just a word about what those receptions mean as part of the performance process?
Yeah, we would do 4 performances, 2 for just residents of the prison, and then 2 performances that would include people from the outside of prison, including family and friends of the actors, and also other guests who just come to see the play. And after the play was over, after each night that the public performances were open, there'd be like a love-in. There'd be a lot of hugging and mingling. The actors would get to meet people who weren't in their families, who weren't their guests. They would have just gotten a lot of applause and attention. And then when Ashley came to see our production of Winter's Tale in 2014, she was able to meet a lot of the men who had just performed. And that's the part of my program that I feel best about, is just this very deep culture of love. And that's when I started doing the plays, I didn't see that coming. I didn't expect that, but that's what happened.
It's a beautiful program, and thank you for your work, Johnny. I want to carry this theme of the culture of love into talking to my good friend Viviane Narvaes, who works with a program called Teatro na Prisão in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And one of the things that brings me great joy in getting to visit Vivi and Teatro na Prisão each year as part of the exchange program that we do at Prison Creative Arts Project, when we work with Teatro na Prisão in the prisons, is that we get to hug everybody. In Michigan, you can only shake hands with people in prison. But when I walk into the prison in Brazil, even a men's prison, a theater workshop with 50 people in it, I get a hug and a kiss on both cheeks from every man in the workshop. And it's just such a beautiful thing to be able to share that love in the theater. So, bem-vinda, Vivi. Would you please tell us about your program?
Hi everyone. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank Ashley and all the organizer for inviting us to be here. I'm very happy to meet you all. I have heard a lot about your work, and it's very nice and also important to have this opportunity to share our experiences in prisons around the world. So I'm coordinate in partnership with Natalia Ribeiro Fisch, the program Culture in Prison. And the program is made up of some projects, theater workshops for incarcerated women. When Ashley visited us, she saw our Romeo and Juliet, and I'm afraid to talk about that with you folks because it's a very different perspective from Shakespeare play. In the book, Ashley talks about that. We made workshops for incarcerated men. And also you saw, Ashley, when you visit, I think for the second time, an exercise over lower deaths by Gorky. And in fact, it should be noted then when we finished the play, they did not allow anyone to watch the presentation. Do you remember we had that kind of carnival procession with drums, loud laughs and a lot of joy. I think, and we walk through the galleries of prison, and I think because the prison has to be a place of silence and suffer, to they're not allowed the audience to the play. And we made workshops for incarcerated mothers and her babies. It's a specific situation here in Brazil, very sad. And now we have a group, LGBTQI plus. It's okay to say that. Okay. There's a group in one of facilities, and we have the project, The Reader as a Protagonist, which holds debates on readings and creative writing workshops for people who recently left the prisons or in semi-open. This project was created by us before we visit PICAP, and it's absolutely under its influence from PICAP. And finally, we have a Fuga Collective, a mixed theater group formed by free and incarcerated artists. Ashley saw in the last visit our play Show Me the Way Out, a loose adaptation of Tennessee Williams, of Escape by Tennessee Williams. And I don't know if I have time. I think this is a panoramic view about the program. We usually we go once a week to each of the 3 units where the workshops take place, and we go teachers and students from the project. The methodologies used in the workshops are variable. They depend on the team formed each year, on the interests of incarcerated people, and also the interests of the group of students. In the best scenarios, when everything works well, I mean by that, when we manage to get in prison regularly, when the choices we make are right, we do 2 plays a year with each class, but this is not always the case. Sometimes we choose to do, I don't know how I say, aula espetáculo, show class.
A showcase.
Something like that. Or just semester closing events, small events that promote only a fraternization of the group involved. So I think it's a panoramic view about the program. In another moment, I'd like to talk about the prison situation here in Brazil, because it's important to share with you.
Thank you, Vivi. That was beautiful. And it is such a large and complex and interesting program. It's 27 years old now. Is that correct? Teatro na Prisão?
25 now. Yeah.
Quarter of a century of theater. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'd like to turn now to Maud Clark, who is with Somebody's Daughter Theater Company in Australia. And one of the things that I think is a nice connection between the work that I've seen of Teatro na Prisão in Brazil and what you all are doing in Australia is the incredible vivacity of the women in the prison and how much control they take over the play. I talk about these 2 theater companies next to each other in the same chapter, which is about creating hope, because I felt like both of those theater companies gave me a lot of hope and seem to be claiming it for themselves. So welcome, Maud. I'm so happy you can join us today.
Thank you, Ashley. Look, it's wonderful, and it's wonderful to hear all these wonderful stories of creativity and what it does, because our basic belief is that art's the great equalizer. So it doesn't matter where you come from, that when you meet creatively, you're meeting human to human, and that's where huge stuff happens. So Somebody's Daughter Theatre, as I said, has been going now for 40 years, which is a long time. And it first started when we took a play into the prison and we were asked by one of the women to do some drama. And I think that's really important, that the community asked for it itself. And we were at the VCA, an art, a training college at the time. And we did exactly what we were doing in our drama classes. So all of the work that we have done over that time has been working in the same way that we would work with constraints with a professional group of actors. And the whole work has been about devising new Australian works and giving people that are usually spoken for the opportunity to be the carriers of the story. So they're speaking for themselves. And so how it works now is every week of the year, except for Christmas, a couple of weeks when it's not happening, there are workshops in drama and visual arts. From about halfway through the year, or about April, May, things start to intensify. So it might go to 3 days a week when people start working towards a major production. Then there's about 6 weeks full-time rehearsal. And in around September, usually around this time or just before, there's a major production. And that's where a kind of a theatre is almost constructed within the gym. For 3 nights, there's outside are allowed to come in. And I think it's really interesting with the references to other people. It's the only time that people can mingle with their family, and that is extraordinary. And I think one of the most important things that happens. And then because the prison's got so big now, I think there's either 2 or 3 performances for the women within the prison. The prison system itself couldn't handle more than 3 public performances. It's huge because it's a maximum security prison. In terms of cross-section, I think the last play, there were about 13 nationalities. So everybody, Aboriginal, Maori, African, Middle Eastern, Australian, everybody works together. And it's quite stunning. There's a great emphasis on music, on movement and theatre. So, in terms of Shakespeare, we would be using text work to build skills work up. But the main emphasis for us is new devised work. And then the other part of the company has been the post-release work. So we will work with women post-release, and we're trying to gear that up more. And that is more difficult because you have to protect those women, or provide safe passage for those women who are doing well in staying drug-free and all of that stuff. So there's more of a juggling that happens on the outside. But we are planning to have a major production on the outside in probably next year. The COVID stuff has thrown everything out the window. But I find it very interesting in terms of people speaking those, when you talk about love, I mean, it's a place where people can meet and they can be together, and the whole process of drama where you're doing your voice work or your body work, there's such an exchange, and it's quite stunning. And what we have also found, and this is where we've been able to emulate stuff on the outside, so often when people, and we all know this, they go through a creative process and they find parts of themselves and things that they've never done anything before. And they're ready to undertake education. They're ready to do things. So with the young people, that's why we work in partnership with education and health. So you've got the kids of people and their trajectory was to be ending up in the system. They're not. They're getting their year 11 or their year 12. There's a kid recently that is now at the Victorian College of the Arts doing drama, which is extraordinary, So I think I've said enough, but that's about an overview. I can talk more about what we're doing in the COVID time later.
Thank you so much, Maud. And I tell everybody I meet when I talk about prison theater work that somebody's daughter has the best name for a prison theater company that I found anywhere in the world, because it reminds us that each one of those women belongs to somebody. Each one of those women was loved or should have been and was somebody's daughter. So I thank you for...
That's one of the big things for me. Any one of us could have ended up within the system. And that I always remember, because I had one of the greatest epiphanies of my life was standing in the circle in 1980 thinking, that could be my mother, that could be my sister. And I hadn't realized before that time that I even had prejudice, that I even thought that these women were different. And I think that's one of the things in this work that would be apparent to everyone. We don't actually understand our underlying prejudices. And that's the power of the creative work, that you cut through all that. When people are listening to a song or watching a play, they're meeting this person not as a prisoner, not as a drug addict, but as another human that is the carrier of a story. But I'll shut up now.
No, that was beautiful. And it's so true. As my mama would say, there but for the grace of God, go any one of us. And it's appropriate that you spoke, Maude, right before my good friend Kate Rubin from the William Head on Stage, or the Who's on Stage company up in Canada, because I believe that your two programs are the oldest continuously running prison theater companies that I encountered in my research. So Kate, tell us what's happening in Canada.
Well, the smoke has cleared here as well, because we have received a lot of the Oregon, Washington, and California fires across where I am on Vancouver Island. So we're happy that the rains are here on the coast for sure, and for the world in general. But thank you, Ashley, and thank you so much for being here. All of us together, it's wonderful. My name is Kate Rubin. And I also am, thrilled, Maude. There's something very similar there around a lot of things that you've said. And that's fascinating to me, you know, these two programs that have been going now for almost 40 years. Next year will be the 40th anniversary. And we are hoping to have a big celebration next year in regards to that. And we'll just keep our fingers crossed, around COVID. So I have been involved now with this particular men's theater company that is inside of a prison for the last 15 years. And I am not alone. I am amongst probably a cohort of about, all told, there's probably 30 or 40 other artists over the years that have directed and facilitated and worked with Who's. And that's the unique thing. One of the unique things about William Head on Stage is that it's a company that was started by the men. It was initiated through a theater class that came out of a university, through the University of Victoria here on the island, and also in Vancouver. And then the men were so inspired and really wanted to do their own thing. So they started a company within the prison. So they have their own board. They work with the administration every year to hire and create their programming. And of course that changes, because even 15 years ago, it was a medium security. So it was all different in terms of how many men were involved and how long they were in the prison. Now it's a minimum security and people are moving through faster. So that creates a whole other dynamic. And one of the things that has happened for myself as a theater practitioner and teaching artist is that I have been called, as well as a number of people, thankfully, and I feel so honored to be called to help sort of facilitate, but also direct and be part of a process to support the men, because every year it's a change of board and they're really working to try to keep that consistency of programming every year. So what has happened and what has evolved now, because it's always changing, is that yearly there's a big production. So it's similar to what Maude was saying, where there's a devising process, especially in the last number of years, we've been devising specifically and bringing in as many of the talents that walk through the door, and we never know who's going to come in through the door. And that's the exciting thing, is that we will get writers, we will get artists, visual artists, we will get people that are interested in the technical aspect of theater. And we try to do our best to just help support them in whatever way we can, those of us on the outside that come in to do these productions. So the productions themselves usually the devising starts around April, and we put on a show just right around now, as Maude was saying that they do. So pretty much this week would be our last week of like dress rehearsals. We'd be insane. We'd be there 6 or 7 times a day, basically almost living in the prison. And then for 5 weeks, there is a production for the public, which is another, I think, unusual thing in that the institution has allowed the public to come in. So up to over 2,000 people come in every year from the public, and they are only vetted through their driver's license. It's a huge risk on the part of the administration to allow people to come into the prison. So every year we're always like, please, you know, may nothing go wrong. And Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, generally, we are performing in a couple of matinees. And then the final thing that I'll add around that is that something that got incorporated probably about 10 years ago was a Q&A. And I will put a mention out to Kurt, because Kurt Toffland helped us at that point, as well as a number of other people. The administration was going to shut that down. We did have a meet and greet with the audience, as someone else I think had mentioned, and that was a beautiful kind of sharing of love, speaking of love, with the audience and the actors. And the administration was too afraid of that commingling, and they were going to just stop that happening. And then Kurt mentioned a Q&A, because I think that happens with his programming. And so we pitched that to the administration. And now we have a 15 to 20 minute Q&A with the audience. And that is one of the most powerful parts, as well as everything else, but it's an added incredible sharing, because for the audience to experience the men in their full expression and to get that sense of, yes, that is someone's brother, someone's son, someone's father, and really have that moment. That is a huge aha and a profound deepening and exchange with the audience members and the men alike. So there's this, I don't even know what you want to call it, this sort of golden thing that happens on those 15 minutes at the end. Finally, after the show is over, we do a debrief, and then a break at Christmas, and around January to April, we do workshops. So those of us on the outside are asked to come back in, and we just go in once a week. And I'll speak later about how that's working for us now, before we go and pitch into high gear into the production mode. So that kind of gives you a sense of the whole year and how it works for Who's. I think I'm done.
Thank you, Kate. One of the things that I love about William Head on Stage is that it's the only place in the world where I bought a ticket online to go to prison. It was just the most fantastical experience to pay $20, $25, something like that, to get to go to prison, which made me very, very happy. So, and thank you for your beautiful work.
Thank you. I just wanted to just quickly say about how that works payment wise, is that as in the last number of years, well, usually what it does is it goes towards the next year's production and to help pay for that year, as well as the last number of years, the men have figured out a way they choose a charitable donation if there is any extra funds. So there's been some amazing donations that have gone out into the community, to different homeless shelters or different situations in our community on the island. So that's a way that they feel they can also give back. So I just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and a remarkable thing that an incarcerated board of directors can run its own theater company and hire professionals like Kate to come in to do the work with them. I love that empowerment in their theater company. So now we turn, last but certainly not least, to the wonderful Miranda Young Jahangir, who is in Durban, South Africa, and does the most amazing work with women in prison there. Hi, Miranda.
Hey, Ashley. Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name's Miranda Young Jahangir. I work at a university in Durban, which is on the east coast of South Africa. And my kind of focus and passion has always been theatre, and particularly what we call applied theatre or theatre for social change. And I became interested in the idea of working in prisons after 1994, when Nelson Mandela was released and things became possible. So the prisons opened up for the first time in terms of having recreational projects. And we initiated a project in a big prison called Westville Prison Complex. There's about 15,000 offenders and 5 separate prisons. And I was working in the female prison from the beginning. but other colleagues of mine worked in the male maximum security and youth center, and I've also worked in those prisons before. But about 10 years into the project, we encountered some problems when the theatre group actually became a non-gang gang, because we have national prison gangs in South Africa, and it caused violence in the prison. So they shut down those projects. But in the female centers, we haven't had that problem. So I've been fortunate in that my project has been uninterrupted, and this will have been its 20th year, but unfortunately it won't be happening this year. Again, we also do September, October productions. But essentially, it's gone through various phases, but as it exists now, it's connected to a postgraduate program called Theatre for Debate. And students go into the prison and work with offenders over a few months. And essentially, it is about creating spaces for the women to have conversations with each other, which they often aren't allowed to do, because all women are invited to participate so they can move between sections and meet each other and engage with each other. And they often have contentious conversations. So we use the theatre to kind of pose a problem. So the theatre will kind of describe a situation that the women feel passionate about, or they want to talk about, essentially often that is happening in the prison, but it might be something that they're worrying about outside, or things that they, what are we going to do on release, or how are we going to cope with stigma? Or it might be issues around GBV, which is a big issue, HIV and AIDS in the prisons. Issues of motherhood also in prison is a big thing also in South Africa. So whatever's on their minds, and they create the play, and then we have that conversation afterwards. And it's, yeah, every time we do it, it amazes me, the kinds of conversations that people have. And also the interaction with the students, which is about 10 or 15 students sometimes. In the earlier days, we would have about 100 students bust into the prisons and spread around 3 different prisons. And yeah, the elation, the connection, the realizations, that this could be my grandmother, this could be my father, those kind of things are life-changing. And yeah, and it's just an incredible thing. And every year that we do it, it makes me feel that it's even more important. So yeah, it's the same. It's, as Ashley said, it's also theatre for social change. We've had some theatre that's actually had real impact in terms of how offenders are treated, or indirectly what they call is a radio banditti, which is like bandit radio, like through the grapevine, people in authority are able to hear what the women are concerned with and affected. So there's different kinds of things that happen as a result of it, but it's also a celebration and an opportunity to be affirmed and loved and celebrated and feel applause and all those things that everyone is talking about, and to have that creative process and to feel that you can do something productive and that you are worthy and able is also what it's all about. And yeah, thanks to everybody for sharing. It's always amazing how, even though our projects are different, there are so many more similarities, especially at the kind of the level of the human level and level of emotion that connects us all. So thank you for sharing as well.
Thank you so much, Miranda. And I think that's so true, that the work that I had the privilege of seeing as I went around the world was at its core the same kind of celebration of human life in really, really dire circumstances. There was a spirit of resistance and joy and community in everything that I saw in all of these programs. And I hope that we are able to carry that spirit forward in this desperately difficult time of the global pandemic, when I believe all of us here who do work in prisons are completely cut off physically from the people with whom we work. So I want to ask you each now to talk to us a little bit about how you personally and the program with which you work is responding to the pandemic. Are you able to stay connected to the theater folks inside the walls, and what does that look like, and where are we headed? I want to mix up the order of things a little bit, so maybe we'll start with Maud this time to find out what's happening in Australia.
We've been in lockdown for a very, very, very long time, and we're all going mad. But there was one other thing that I wanted to mention and I'd forgotten about. Last year, we had this extraordinary thing where the prison allowed 3 women to come out to perform at the MCG when we were doing a show for a big conference. So we had this, it was the first time it happened. And so we had this amazing time at the MCG where 3 women came out for a day. They performed extracts from the show that they'd done in the prison alongside the young people that we work with. And it was really incredibly powerful. And that impact on social policy and social change, which theatre does, you couldn't have had a time that was more pronounced. And it does reflect what we've been doing. We were very fortunate. We were able to keep doing the workshops in the prison. And I think we were one of the only groups that were allowed in right up until the severe lockdown about 6 weeks ago. And what we were able to do and what we planned to do was to do a podcast radio play of the show last year. So the manager, who was wonderful, basically said to Karen, because we thought we had an extra 3 days, and she went in there on the Friday and they were fixing up all the equipment. She said, do it today, you've got to do it today and get out. So they were able to stay in the prison until late, until the night. And they were able to get it in the can as such. So what people are working on in the moment is getting this radio play, which is going to be fantastic. And if we send stuff to you, if you could send it out. And also what the prison has organised is a Zoom drama session. So there's Zoom drama sessions happening, as well as phone calls to the women, which is fantastic. And with the post-release, again, it's Zoom drama sessions, which is quite interesting. And if you're in a 5 kilometre zone, you can meet up. So there's walks along the beach where you can brainstorm and, or just talk. And the other thing that we've been doing, which was finished off, we have been taking some scenes and songs from shows within the prison and making them into digital content. So there's this great piece called No More Hiding, which I'll again send to you, which was done with women post-release and able to film the women in the prison, which was a first for us. It's quite wonderful. And then what we've been doing is just finishing one off on gambling. And what I'll do, Ashley, is get those to you so that you can get them out, because it's incredibly satisfying for us to find a way of taking that work, that precious work that is created by the women out, because that's one of the limitations in terms of protecting people's privacy. But look, COVID is just horrendous. It's changed everything. And when they were rehearsing, everybody's doing African dance in masks. I mean, it's hard enough to breathe anyway. So it's been a very, very challenging time. Yeah.
Thank you, Maud. And I do desperately want to share all of that work. I want to see it and I want to teach it to my students and I want to share it with the whole network at Shakespeare.
Fantastic. It's just great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Viviane, I really want to hear what's happening in Rio right now. And one of the things that I'm so grateful for in the pandemic is that we as facilitators, my students and yours, have been able to stay in touch online through Zoom. And we're sharing a letter exchange among facilitators about what it feels like to go through this time of prison theater making in Brazil and in Michigan. But I know you have lots of other stuff going on during the pandemic. Please tell us.
Today, before the coronavirus health crisis, which still kills more than 800 people a day in Brazil, with the help of the Bolsonaro government, which behaves like a genocide. The situation of the prison system is a mystery. Recently, social movements and civil society organizations have complained to the United Nations about the lack of news about the prisoners, on the deterioration of health and hygiene conditions. Normally, the families carry the jumbo I don't know how to translate. It's a kind of plastic bag with the name of a large airplane, Jumbo. It's just a plastic bag, but they call Jumbo. And in this plastic bag, the families bring to lead to the prisoners um, food products, hygiene products, cleaning, and nowadays this is not allowed. The organizations also denounce the lack of access to exams and doctors and an inhuman treatment. This complaint includes underreporting in the death record in relation to COVID-19. So you can have an idea, in Rio de Janeiro, which has a population of over 50,000 prisoners, only 422 cases were confirmed, and the number of 16 deaths was reported on official channels. This number 16 includes prison officers. So in Brazil today, we have 60,000 people incarcerated, and tests were carried out on less than 10% the prison population. The visits are suspended at the facilities, and we are looking for some alternatives to continue with our work. Some of them are the project Sign of Life, Solidarity Correspondence. We sent letters proposing theatrical activities to the incarcerated people who did the workshops with us. And this idea came from a conversation between us, Ashley. You told me you were corresponding with some people. And from that, I thought, we organize sending letter to our incarcerated students. But we send about 300 letters, but as Brazilian society is suffering terrible from the pandemic, postal workers went on strike. Then we have to wait the strike is over to continue. We also do, like Ashley talked, a exchange of letters between Cultura na Prisão, Culture in Prison, PICAP, and Vicente Concilio's group in Santa Catarina State. We formalize a research group called Observatory of Artistic Practices in Prisons and Other Places of Deprivation of Liberty, which includes our 3 universities, and of its goals is building a map of the arts in prisons in Brazil, connecting people, connecting researchers and students, building our community, I think. And finally, the Fuga Collective are producing something of hybrid theater and audiovisual videos and experiments during this period. Now, to us, the most important is being alive and expect the better conditions to the people who's incarcerated now. I think.
Obrigada, Vivi. Yeah, it's a lot going on, and Brazilian prisons are all prisons are such a hard place to be, but the not knowing how many people are dying and not knowing how many people are sick, it makes it particularly difficult for all of our friends and loved ones in Brazil who are dealing with all of these issues. It's so hard not having good information and knowing that people aren't getting good care. So thank you for all of your work. Franny, how are things in the COVID life at Shakespeare in prison?
We are doing what we can, always in collaboration with alumni of our program. We're not able to be like in direct contact with the people we work with who are still on the inside, but what we have been able to do, inspired by Rowan McKenzie, who does prison Shakespeare work in the UK, is we are able to every 2 weeks put together an activity pack, which is a two-sided piece of paper that starts with a piece of text by Shakespeare and then has some suggested prompts for things you could do or talk about or whatever. You know, Romeo's just a kid, what advice would you give him? Oh, you know, always kind of geared toward not how should this be done, but how might you do it? And so giving folks, you know, like theatrical prompts, but also stuff for things that they might write or things that they might want to draw, you know, whatever. And then, you know, again, the importance of being able to work directly with alumni who are on the outside is we have folks who were tutors when they were on the inside, advising us on those activity packs in terms of what, you know, is there wording here that might be rough, or what would this prompt be better? I mean, even in terms of like, you know, saying these are the different things you could do, they said you have to add, you can think about it, because some people might not even want to write. They might not want to talk to anyone. So I was like, this is why you guys are essential, because what do I know? And then on the outside here, we continue to work with folks on specific projects that, you know, the book project keeps going. We were on Zoom every 2 weeks before Zoom was cool, discussing things for this book, which is a critical edition of Richard III. We also, you know, in terms of, you know, the difficulties of keeping these programs going right now, a lot of our program alumni have come together with us to help with fundraising efforts, because they know how important it is for this to keep going and that it needs to be funded in order for that to happen. So we've made some videos in collaboration. Everyone will send in video clips and I kind of put it together and we put it out there, and again, keep the work, the connection and the community that we built visible, and hopefully keep some funding visible as well. You know, I think that's we're trying out some different, you know, structured Zoom programming that's been a little bit challenging so far, but we're working on it. And really, as people have been getting out the past 6 months, really making sure that like we're really celebrating like you got out of there and we're still here for you, even though you haven't seen or heard from us in a while. And you know, it's tough, but we're doing whatever we can. And I think that I'm hopeful that, or I hope that we'll be able to do more for ensemble members who are on the inside than these activity packs. But for now, at least we're able to do that. And the folks who are coming out are like, yeah, that was super. It was super cool to get that. And it was good food for thought. Like, that's awesome. That's all we wanted to be able to do for you guys, whatever we could.
Male in prison means so much, and especially in this time when people are cut off physically from their families. That's huge. Thank you so much, Franny. Miranda, how are you navigating the pandemic situation in South Africa?
Well, like everybody here, I think most of the countries represented here are in the top 8. So we have also experienced heavy lockdowns right at the beginning. So in March, I was actually invited to go into the male prison and assist with the play that the men were doing there, that they were invited to take out and do for school kids. And you can imagine how exciting that was. And it all happened right then, and they never got to do it. And everything was just shut down completely. You know, we were, you know, in our houses and not allowed to get out. And yeah, so we have just gone down to what they call level 1 as of this week, which means that we are allowed to kind of engage with others. But obviously the university is concerned with protecting the students, and we've had high rates of infection in the prisons. Our president also released quite a large number of prisoners to try and reduce the overcrowding, which is a huge challenge in South Africa. So, you know, unlike many of the prisons in the global north, we we're not able to do things like Zoom, or, that's just not an option. And also the prisons are so understaffed that if I was to kind of message or email my kind of connection in the prison who assists me, who's in charge of recreation and care, to run a project on my behalf, it just wouldn't happen. So I'm trying to think creatively now. I have been in contact, and I don't know if I'll be able to take students in, but there's a possibility that I'll be able to try and engage in some kind of project. So yeah, it hasn't been a very good time at all, particularly for people inside in South Africa, for sure.
Thank you, Miranda. So many challenges for all of us. Johnny, do you want to talk about what's happening with Open Hearts, Open Minds in this difficult time? You're muted, Johnny. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Yeah. Like everyone else, Open Hearts, Open Minds very frustrated with the current situation. They'd like to be going inside and meeting actually with people. They're just trying everything they can think of to stay in touch. In Oregon right now, the communications with the people inside the prisons are just one way. In other words, we have something like what Franny described, a kind of activity packets and other things that Open Hearts, Open Minds is sending in to the people who've been in our program at the time that COVID hit. But Open Hearts, Open Minds didn't get permission for communication to come the other direction. My own circumstance is a little different. I stepped down as executive director of Open Hearts, Open Minds a little over a year ago, and I have a lot of contact with men in prison, phone calls and letters, and my new nonprofit organization sends in a weekly newsletter, and we have a meditation and mindfulness project with people who live in prison and people who don't. And then I got some really good news this morning from Lauren Mueller, who's editing Bushra's film, that the first draft of the film is now finished. And just the first draft, and a lot of work ahead, but this is a feature-length documentary film called A Midsummer Night's Dream in Prison that was shot in 2010 and hopefully will be coming out next year. So that's something I'm looking forward to.
That's really beautiful, and I'm so grateful to see it getting done. Bushra Azouz was an incredible filmmaker, beautiful person who worked with Open Hearts, Open Minds, who passed away in the last year. And it's such a wonderful thing that her work will continue to live. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, well, the film is definitely going to get finished, and that's great.
Wonderful. I'm sure the Shakespeare in Prison Network will help us spread the good news when it comes out.
I'm sure.
Kate, please tell us how you're doing and how the Who's folks are doing in the pandemic.
Okay, I'll be short and sweet here. I think we're down to the last 5 minutes or so. Well, we just had good news last week. We are able to start going in one facilitator at a time with 5 men starting next week, October 3rd, 10 days or so from now, which is, we didn't expect that. I'm actually surprised that we're able to do that, but we have a process by which we will be going in masked and only one of us at a time with a very small group of guys. And so we'll have to figure out how that's going to go. We have to be just sitting the whole time. So those of us that, all of us that know about theater, is going to be really interesting, sitting masked in a circle. And I mean, I have ideas of like things one can do in a circle while sitting. And so we will figure it out. At least we're getting in, and that's amazing. So that is really good news. Yeah. And then the other thing we started, because we couldn't do the production this year, Emma Zablosky, who was going to direct it, she had this great idea we've been sort of talking about some kind of activity process. And so she created an exchange, a creative exchange, which the head of the board, one of the guys, has helped work with her and with Kathleen Greenfield, who's another one of my cohorts, to facilitate an exchange where the men send us something and we send them something, and it's either in writing or visual art form via some prompts. So there's like a free writing or free drawing warm up, and it's kind of got this really cool template, and you can do as much of it as you want or as little of it as you want. And we're in week 3 now, and we have about 8 to 10 guys that are participating, and there's about 8 to 10 of us. And that's been really actually fascinating and an interesting way to be doing something creatively together. And we're looking at potentially, because I'm sure we won't be doing anytime soon public theater with them, is to perhaps do something like an audio play podcast, something where we are. And so I'm really fascinated, Maud, about what you're doing. I know that Sarah Woodland in Australia, who we've had connection with, has done some really interesting audio play stuff. Lots of people around are working with that idea, as well as the Zoom thing. So we're just trying to think out of the box right now, which is, I guess, one of the good things about all this is that we're all trying to think out of the box and how to keep the work alive and how to keep supporting them and how to keep ourselves supported and understanding what we can do when our hands are so tied. So that's kind of a little bit of what's happening for us this time. And we'll see where it goes starting next week.
Well, be safe, and thank you for taking on all of that. I'm so moved and inspired to hear from each of you and to see your beautiful faces again. It's been too long since I've seen most of you in person, and I'm just so grateful for each of you and for the work that you do in all of these prisons and the inspiration that you brought me. I hope that my book can help the world to know better all the beautiful things that I got to observe in meeting each of you and your programs. The organizers of this conference asked us to leave people with a question. So I wanted to sort of open the floor to all of you as we prepare to have a live Q&A with an audience in a future week than when we're recording this. Are there things that came up for us in this conversation that we might want the general public who are thinking about theater in prisons to help us think through in this difficult moment? Does anybody feel a question coming on about what we might want to talk to others about as we keep thinking through this hard time? It's a big thing to ask, I know.
Ashley, the thing for me is it's not so much a question, I don't know how to phrase it. One of our big things is that we maintain that we're not therapy. And because people I don't think people realize that it's another form of prejudice where you put prison work or community work into that basket. And the thing for me is, and we would witness it all the time, is the reminder that creative work, which is about soul and spirit, is about where you're able to bring all of yourself to the present moment. And when human beings are like that, that's when real change, that's when real connection, and that's where we all, not only as individuals, but as a whole society, benefit. So I think the work that happens within the prison is profound. The creative work is profound in terms of the energy that it releases, not only for the prison population, which is the feedback that all of us would get all the time of how that uplifts, but the ripples that go out. And it's such an important voice, and creative work is so important. So I don't know how you phrase that, but that's something, because people talk about, you know, you must feel so good, and it's all this stuff about being such a good person. And I think, what the? We're doing exactly what we want to do as artists. We're working creatively with meaning, with something that has meaning. How lucky are we? So I think there's that, all of that goody stuff gives me the, and I don't know how you phrase the question.
Well, I love that, Maud, and I quote you liberally in the book talking about this notion that when people in the free world, especially privileged people, get to do the art, then it's art. And when people who are really struggling are engaged in the arts, we often call it therapy. And that the truth is that art is therapeutic for all of us equally, not more so when you're in a really desperate situation of oppression. So the question that I took out of the beauty of what you just said is, how can we help the world to understand how much this work gives to all of us mutually, that we are not the givers, the generous people who go into prison to help to make this happen, but that we receive every bit as much from the people inside and from the work itself collectively as a whole community. All of us are receiving. So how do we tell the world in a bigger sense that that's happening, and share the beauty of what the people inside are giving us? That's a question I'd love more answers to from a general audience when we start talking to more people. But I think we are at time right now. I thank each of you from the bottom of my heart. It's been such a beautiful thing to get to talk to you all together. One of my dreams just came true. And I look forward to following the work that each of your programs does in many, many years to come, I hope, until we don't have prisons anymore. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and good night.